"You don't need this," my son-in-law sneered, snatching the keys to my brand-new Airstream trailer right out of my hand. He told me I belonged in a nursing home, not on the road. He drove away with my retirement dream, thinking he had won, thinking he had finally put the old man in his place. But he made one mistake. He didn't check the glove compartment. What he found inside didn't just stop the car. It ended his entire life as he knew it. I am Darius Coleman, 70 years old, and for 40 years I moved freight across this country managing logistics for a federal transport fleet. I know how to track a package from a warehouse in Chicago to a doorstep in Miami without losing a second, yet somehow I didn't see that the biggest thief was sleeping in my daughter's bed. If you have ever been underestimated because of your age, hit that like button and subscribe. This is how I reminded my family who was really in charge. The heat coming off of the asphalt of my driveway was enough to distort the air, but the chill running down my spine had nothing to do with the Arizona summer. I stood there, my hand still half extended, staring at the empty space where my keys used to be. My son-in-law Gavin stood before me, twirling the keychain around his finger like a trophy. He was 35 years old, a man who wore suits that were too tight and drove a truck he couldn't afford, a man who had never looked me in the eye with anything other than veiled contempt. "I said you don't need this, Darius," Gavin repeated, his voice dripping with that casual arrogance that always made my teeth clench. He never called me Dad. He never called me Mr. Coleman. It was always just Darius, said with a tone that suggested he was tolerating a slow child. "A man your age has no business hauling 3 tons of aluminum down the interstate. You're a hazard. The highway patrol sees a black man in a rig like this. They are just going to look for a reason to pull you over. I am doing you a favor taking this off your hands." I looked past him, past his smug grin, searching for the one person who should have been standing between me and this disrespect. My daughter, Naya. She was sitting in the passenger seat of Gavin's massive black pickup truck, the engine idling with a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. The window was rolled down halfway. She looked at me for a split second, her eyes wide and fearful, before she dropped her gaze to her lap, studying her fingernails as if they held the secrets of the universe. "Nia," I called out, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Is this what we discussed? Is this what your mother would have wanted?" Nia didn't look up. She mumbled something, her voice barely audible over the hum of the truck's air conditioning. "Gavin's right, Daddy. Your eyes aren't what they used to be. The reflexes, it's just safer this way. We don't want you to get hurt." My Nia, the girl I'd carried on my shoulders at parades, the girl Beatrice and I had put through private schools working double shifts so she wouldn't have to bow her head to anyone. Beatrice, God rest her soul, would have marched over there and dragged Gavin out of that truck by his ear. But Beatrice was gone, buried 3 years now, and in her absence Nia had shrunk. She had folded herself into the small, silent shape that Gavin preferred. Seeing her there, refusing to meet my eyes while her husband robbed her father in broad daylight, hurt more than the loss of the keys. It was a betrayal that cut bone deep. I turned my attention back to Gavin. He was enjoying this. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, smelling of stale coffee and expensive cologne. "Look, let's be real," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ideally, we would sell this thing and put the money back in the account where it belongs. But since you already blew the cash and signed the title, we are going to put it to use. Nia and the kids want to see the Grand Canyon. We are taking it tomorrow." I felt the blood rushing in my ears. That Airstream wasn't just a vehicle. It was a promise I had made to myself. For 40 years, I sat in an office directing trucks to places I never got to visit. I routed shipments to Yellowstone, to the Redwoods, to the Painted Deserts, always promising Beatrice that one day when the pension kicked in, we would go. We would see it all. I bought that trailer with the money from the life insurance policy she left me. It was supposed to be our trip, and now this mediocre stockbroker was claiming it for a family vacation I wasn't invited to. "You are taking my trailer," I stated, my voice low and dangerous, "without my permission." Gavin laughed, a sharp barking sound that grated on my nerves. "Permission, Darius? You are barely competent to manage your own breakfast, let alone a $150,000 asset. And don't worry about being lonely here in this big empty house while we are gone. We have a solution for that too." He pointed a thumb over his shoulder towards the street. "On our way out of town tomorrow morning, we will swing by and pick you up. But you aren't coming to the canyon. I already spoke to the director at Golden Oaks. They have a bed open in the assisted living wing. It is better this way. Safer." We already packed up most of your essentials from the garage. We will drop you off, you can get settled, and we will enjoy the trip, knowing you are secure. Golden Oaks, the state-run facility downtown, the place where they sent people who had no money and no family, the place that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. He wasn't just stealing my vacation, he was evicting me from my own life. He was declaring me obsolete. You packed my things, I said, the words tasting like ash. Just the basics, Gavin said, turning his back on me. You won't need much where you are going, civilian clothes, a few photos, simple living for a simple man. He walked back to his truck, the keys to my Airstream jingling in his hand. He backed the truck up the hitch, clanging loudly as he connected it to my trailer. He did it with a practiced ease that told me he had been planning this for weeks. He hadn't just decided today. This was a coup, a hostile takeover of my assets and my freedom. I stood there frozen as he connected the safety chains. I watched as he checked the lights. I watched my daughter, my flesh and blood, stare straight ahead through the windshield, refusing to acknowledge the crime happening 3 feet away from her. "See you tomorrow, Darius," Gavin shouted out the window as he put the truck in gear. "Be ready by 8, and don't make a scene. It will only make it harder on Nia." He stomped on the gas. The tires of his truck spun on the gravel, kicking up a cloud of dust that coated my face. My Airstream, my silver bullet, my retirement dream lurched forward and followed him down the street. I watched it go until it turned the corner and disappeared from sight. I stood alone in the silence of the empty driveway. The sun was still hot, but I felt cold. A younger man might have chased them. A weaker man might have fallen to his knees and cried. I did neither. I wiped the dust from my face. I straightened my shirt. I walked into my house, the house I had paid for with sweat and equity, the house Beatrice and I had made a home. It was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with the ghosts of the past and the tools of my trade. I walked into my study and sat down at my desk, the mahogany cool under my fingertips. Gavin saw an old black man with gray hair and a slow walk. He saw a victim. He forgot who I was. He forgot that for 4 decades I was the man who solved the unsolvable. I was the man who tracked millions of dollars of inventory through hurricanes and strikes. I didn't just know where things were. I knew how to control them. I didn't reach for a tissue to dry my eyes. I reached for my iPad. I opened the tracking application I had installed on the Airstream, a military-grade GPS system I used to use for high-value freight. A small red dot blinked on the screen, moving steadily north towards Gavin's house. I watched the dot move. I let him think he had won. I let him drive home, park my trailer in his driveway, and probably brag to his friends about how he had handled his father-in-law. I let him sleep. Because tomorrow when he hit the road, he was going to learn a lesson about ownership. He thought he took my keys. He didn't know that I still held the controls. And he certainly didn't know what was waiting for him in the glove compartment of that truck he was so proud of. I leaned back in my chair, the screen glowing in the dim room. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They wanted to put me in a home. They wanted to take what was mine. Let the games begin. The only light in my study came from the cold blue glow of my iPad screen. It was 5 in the morning and the house was silent. A heavy, suffocating silence that usually comes after a funeral. But I was not mourning. I was hunting. On the digital map in front of me, a small red dot pulsed rhythmically, moving steadily west along Interstate 40. That dot was my Airstream trailer, and pulling it was the black pickup truck my son-in-law Gavin was so proud of. He thought he was driving towards a vacation at the Grand Canyon. He thought he was driving away from his responsibilities and the old man he planned to dump in a nursing home. He did not know he was driving straight into a chokehold I had set up weeks ago. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was cold, but I did not care. My eyes were locked on the coordinates. Mile marker 112. They were deep in the desert now, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but sand, heat, and the illusion of freedom. In my 40 years as a director of logistics, I learned that movement does not equal progress. You can move very fast in the wrong direction. Gavin was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I did not call the police. Calling the police is what a victim does. It is a plea for help. I did not need help. I needed to execute a correction. I picked up my phone and opened my messages. I typed a single line to Gavin. Check the glove compartment. I hit send. Then I leaned back and waited. The response was almost immediate. My phone vibrated against the mahogany desk, buzzing like an angry hornet. It was a call from Gavin. I answered on the second ring, putting it on speaker so his voice would fill the empty room. "Darius, are you serious right now?" Gavin shouted, his voice distorted by the background noise of the highway and the wind rushing past the windows. I could hear the radio playing some upbeat pop song, the soundtrack to their theft. "Do not text me while I'm driving. It is dangerous. And stop stalking us. We will call you when we get to the canyon to let you know which room number you are in at the nursing home." I said nothing. I let his arrogance hang in the air. I let him think he was still the one in control. "Did you hear me?" Old man Gavin continued his tone, shifting from annoyance to mockery. "Go back to sleep. You are probably confused. You probably forgot we left. Open the glove compartment, Gavin," I said. My voice was calm, flat, the voice I used when I had to fire a driver for stealing fuel. He laughed. A short, sharp bark. "What is this? A going-away present? Did you leave me some cash for gas? That would be nice of you, considering you are living rent-free in our lives." I heard the sound of the latch clicking open. I heard papers shuffling. Then the silence. The music in the background seemed to get louder as Gavin stopped speaking. The wind noise cut out as he likely rolled up the window. "What is this?" Gavin asked. His voice had changed. The mockery was gone, replaced by a thread of confusion. "Why is there a blue paper in here? It says repossession order. What kind of sick joke is this, Darius?" "It is not a joke," I replied. "Read the name on the creditor line." I heard the rustling of paper again. I could imagine Nia leaning over from the passenger seat, trying to see what had made her husband go quiet. I could imagine the blood draining from Gavin's face as his eyes scanned the document. Darius Coleman. Gavin read slowly. "Why is your name on a repo order for my truck?" "Because you do not own that truck, Gavin," I said, "and neither does the bank. Not anymore. Last week the bank put your loan up for sale as a distressed asset. You have missed 4 payments in a row. You thought they were just sending you warning letters, but they were preparing to cut their losses. I bought the debt. I bought the note. I own the paper on that truck, Gavin, which means legally I am the owner of the vehicle you are driving. And since you are over 90 days delinquent, I have issued an order for immediate repossession." "You can't do that," Gavin stammered. The arrogance was melting away, revealing the panic underneath. "This is my truck. I leased it. I am the one driving it. You are the one defaulting on it," I corrected him. "You told me yesterday that I was incompetent. You told me I couldn't manage my own assets, yet here you are driving a vehicle you haven't paid for, pulling a trailer you stole, funded by a man you are trying to institutionalize." Nia's voice came through the speaker, then shrill and terrified. "Daddy, what does this mean? Why are you doing this?" I closed my eyes for a second. Hearing her voice still hurt, but pain was a luxury I could not afford right now. "It means, Nia, that your husband is driving stolen property, and I am not talking about the Airstream. I am talking about the truck. You are driving my property without my permission." "This is insane," Gavin yelled. "You bought my debt. Who does that? Who even knows how to do that?" "A man who spent 40 years managing millions of dollars in assets knows how to do that," I said. "You see, Gavin, you look at me and you see a retirement home candidate. You see a check to be cashed. You forgot to look at the man. You forgot to check the paperwork." So what? Gavin scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "What are you going to do?" "Come out here and take it. You are 300 miles away. By the time you get anyone out here, we will be in Nevada. You can't touch us." I watched the red dot on my iPad. It was moving at 70 miles per hour. He was trying to outrun the truth. "You are right, Gavin," I said softly. "I am not there, but my trailer is." "What are you talking about?" Gavin snapped. "The Airstream," I said. "I didn't just buy it for the leather seats and the view. I customized it. I installed a few security features, anti-theft measures." There was a pause. I could hear the gears turning in his head, but he was too slow. He was always too slow. "What kind of measures?" he asked, his voice tight. "The kind that allows the owner to immobilize the wheels remotely in case of theft," I said. I moved my finger over the iPad screen, hovering over the icon that looked like a padlock. "You are bluffing," Gavin said, but he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "You wouldn't dare. We are on the highway. I am not bluffing, Gavin. I am securing my asset." I pressed the icon. On the screen, the status changed from moving to locking. "Good luck," I whispered. I hung up the phone just as I saw the speed on the GPS tracker begin to drop rapidly. 70, 50, 30, 0. The red dots stopped moving. They were stuck, dead in the water, in the middle of the desert, in a truck he didn't own attached to a trailer that had just become an anchor. I sat back in my chair. The silence in the room felt different now. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt like the quiet before a storm. I knew exactly what was happening inside that truck cab. I knew the air conditioning was running burning fuel. I knew the panic was setting in. But I wasn't done. That was just the first lock. I had a whole ring of keys, and I was going to use every single one of them. I watched the digital speedometer on my tablet plummet. It dropped from 70 to 0 in less than 4 seconds. On the map, the red dot that represented my stolen life did not just stop. It skidded. I could almost hear the screech of rubber burning against the hot asphalt of Interstate 40. I could imagine the smell of friction, the violent jerk of the seatbelts locking up, and the look of absolute terror on Gavin's face as the laws of physics suddenly turned against him. He had threatened to turn the truck around. He had threatened to come back here and settle the score with the old man. But he forgot that in the world of heavy transport, momentum is everything, and I had just taken his momentum away. The notification on my screen was simple and satisfying. It read, "Anti-theft protocol engaged. Wheels locked." The Airstream trailer was no longer a luxury vehicle rolling smoothly behind his truck. It had instantly transformed into a 3-ton anchor of aluminum and steel. It was a dead weight dragging him back, fighting every ounce of horsepower his engine could muster. I knew that truck. It was a powerful machine, but nothing on the consumer market is built to drag 3,000 pounds of locked rubber across a desert highway. The transmission would be screaming. The engine temperature gauge would be spiking into the red. Gavin was trying to fight a war of attrition against a machine I had weaponized. I leaned forward in my leather chair, my eyes fixed on the screen. I was not there to see the smoke rising from the tires, but I knew it was there. I knew the trailer had likely jackknifed, slightly blocking at least one lane of traffic, forcing him to the shoulder if he was lucky. He was stranded. He was miles from the nearest service station, surrounded by nothing but cactus dust and the relentless, unforgiving sun. He thought he could bully me. He thought he could take my keys and dictate my future. Now he was learning that control is not about who holds the keys. It is about who owns the system. But I was not finished. The lock was just the beginning. The desert is a cruel place, and it exposes weaknesses quickly. I opened another window on my iPad. This one was connected to the manufacturer's cloud service for the pickup truck. When I bought the debt on Gavin's truck, I didn't just buy the financial paper. I bought the rights to the vehicle's management profile. I saw that he had subscribed to the Premium Comfort package, a remote service that controlled everything from the navigation to the climate control. It was a subscription service paid monthly. And since the account was now in default, and I was the creditor, I had the right to suspend non-essential services. I tapped the screen, cancel subscription, confirm. It took about 30 seconds for the signal to reach the truck's onboard computer. I imagined the moment it happened. The blast of cold air that was keeping them comfortable in that black metal box would falter. The compressor would disengage. The fans would spin down. The silence of the AC cutting out would be louder than the engine. In the middle of the Arizona desert at noon, inside a black vehicle, the temperature rises fast. It goes from uncomfortable to unbearable in minutes. I was not trying to hurt my grandchildren. I knew the windows still worked. I knew they could open the doors, but I wanted Gavin to sweat. I wanted him to feel the heat of his decisions. I wanted the luxury he felt entitled to be stripped away layer by layer until he was left with nothing but his own sweat and his own failure. My phone rang. It was Gavin again. I answered, but I didn't speak. I just listened. The background noise was chaos. I heard the high-pitched crying of my grandchildren, a sound that twisted a knife in my heart, but I forced myself to remain steady. They were scared, but they were safe. Then I heard Nia. She was screaming, her voice shrill and bordering on hysteria. "It is so hot in here, Gavin. Do something. The baby is sweating. Open the windows." "I can't," Gavin shouted back, his voice cracking with panic. "The electronics are glitching. The windows won't roll down. The AC just died. This piece of junk is shutting down on me." It wasn't a glitch. I had put the vehicle into limp mode remotely. It was a safety feature designed to protect the engine when a critical failure was detected. It also happened to lock out most of the cabin controls to force the driver to stop. He was trapped in a sauna of his own making. Darius Gavin screamed into the phone. "I know you are there. I know you did this. You are trying to kill us. You are a sick old man. Turn it back on. Turn the air back on." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "You seem distressed, Gavin," I said calmly. "Perhaps you should check the glove compartment again. Maybe there is a manual in there that explains how to pay your bills." "You are crazy," he yelled, hitting the steering wheel. I could hear the thud of his fist against the plastic. "I am calling the police. Do you hear me? I am calling 911. I am going to tell them you hijacked the vehicle remotely. I am going to tell them you are a danger to yourself and others. You are going to rot in a cell for this." "Go ahead, Gavin," I said. "Call them. Tell them exactly where you are. Tell them you are stranded in a vehicle you do not own, attached to a trailer you stole with a family you cannot provide for. I will be waiting for their call." I heard him fumbling with the phone. I heard him dialing those 3 numbers. He was hyperventilating now. The heat was getting to him. The pressure was crushing him. He was doing exactly what a cornered animal does. He was lashing out. He thought the police were his personal security force. He thought his white skin and his suit would protect him from the reality of the law. He thought he could spin a story about a senile black man and get a sympathy ride home. He had no idea that I had spent 40 years working with law enforcement, navigating way stations and dealing with federal regulations. I knew the law better than he knew his own children's birthdays. "Operator, I need help," Gavin screamed into the phone, his voice shaking. "I am on Interstate 40. My father-in-law has hacked my truck. He is trying to kill my family. He is senile. He has dementia. He is dangerous. Please send someone. He trapped us here." I listened to him lie. I listened to him paint me as a villain, a monster, a broken mind. He used every buzzword he could think of. Hacked, dangerous, dementia. He was building a narrative. He was digging his own grave. I did not interrupt. I did not argue. I let him finish his performance. I let him hang up the phone. Then I opened my email client. I composed a message to the sheriff's department of the county he was stranded in. I attached the bill of sale for the truck. I attached the title for the Airstream. I attached the repossession order signed by a judge, and I attached the video clip from my driveway security camera showing Gavin forcibly taking the keys from my hand while I stood there peacefully. I hit send. The police were coming all right. But they weren't coming to rescue Gavin. They were coming to investigate a theft, and when they arrived, they wouldn't find a helpless victim. They would find a man sweating through his expensive suit, caught red-handed with stolen property, screaming lies that would be disproven by the paperwork in my inbox. The sun beat down on the desert. The red dot on my screen remained motionless. The trap was sprung. Now I just had to wait for the catch. The flashing red and blue lights on my iPad screen were not a simulation. They were the digital signature of law enforcement arriving at the coordinates I had been staring at for the last 20 minutes. Mile marker 112. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. This was the moment. This was where the narrative would either break in my favor or crush me. I knew exactly what Gavin was doing. I knew it because I had seen it 1,000 times in my career. He was stepping out of that truck, smoothing down his expensive suit and putting on the mask of the victim. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered it immediately. "Mr. Coleman," a voice barked on the other end. It was deep, authoritative, and impatient. "This is Deputy Miller with the Sheriff's Department. I am standing here with your son-in-law and your daughter. They tell me you have somehow remotely disabled their vehicle and locked the trailer brakes. Is this true?" "Yes, Deputy," I said calmly. "That is correct. Sir, you need to unlock this vehicle immediately," the deputy said, his voice rising. "We have 2 small children in this car. The heat index is over 100 degrees. Your son-in-law tells me you are suffering from a cognitive decline and that you have become confused about the ownership of these vehicles. He says you think you are a secret agent." I closed my eyes. A secret agent. Gavin was creative. He was playing the card perfectly. He was the respectable white man in a suit stranded by a crazy, senile black man who was hallucinating power he didn't have. I could hear Gavin in the background, his voice shrill and performing. "Tell him he needs his meds, officer. Tell him to stop hurting us. He thinks he is tracking Russian spies." Mr. Coleman, the deputy, continued, losing patience. "If you do not release these brakes right now, I am going to have to dispatch a unit to your residence for a wellness check, and I will be filing charges for reckless endangerment. You are putting your family at risk because of a delusion." This was the tipping point. In the old days, maybe I would have shouted. Maybe I would have tried to explain that I was the one who paid for everything. But shouting gets a black man nowhere with the police, especially when the other guy is wearing a suit and shedding crocodile tears. I didn't need to shout. I had paperwork. Deputy Miller. I said, my voice as level as a concrete floor. I understand what you have been told. You see a family in distress and you want to help, but you are being lied to. I am not confused. I am not senile, and I am certainly not a secret agent. I am the legal owner of both the trailer and the truck your subject is driving. He stole it, deputy. The line went quiet for a second. Stole it, the deputy repeated, skeptical. He says you gave him the keys yesterday. He says you forgot. He took the keys from my hand while I stood on my own property. I corrected him. And before you threaten me with a wellness check again, I need you to look at your mobile data terminal. I just sent an email to your department's public tip line and I CC'd your dispatch. What did you send? The deputy asked, the aggression dampening slightly into confusion. Evidence, I said. I had hit send on the email 30 seconds before he called. It was a comprehensive file. It contained the title to the Airstream stamped and notarized in my name only. It contained the bill of sale for the debt on the pickup truck showing that I was the lien holder and that the vehicle was in default status. It contained the repossession order signed by a judge yesterday afternoon. And most importantly, it contained the video file from my driveway security camera. Open the video, deputy, I said. It is titled Theft in Progress. I waited. The silence on the line stretched out. I could hear the static of the desert wind. I could hear Gavin still ranting in the background. He won't listen to you. He is crazy. Break the lock, officer. Just shoot the lock off. Then I heard the distinct sound of a car door opening and closing. The deputy had gone back to his cruiser. I heard typing, then a sharp intake of breath. The video was clear, high definition. It showed me standing peacefully in my driveway. It showed Gavin getting out of his truck, aggressive and shouting. It showed him physically snatching the keys from my hand. It showed Nia looking away in shame. It showed him driving off with my property while I stood there unmoving. It did not look like a confused old man giving a gift. It looked like a robbery. Mr. Coleman, the deputy, came back on the line. His tone had changed completely. It was no longer the voice of a man talking to a suspect. It was the voice of a man who realized he had almost been played for a fool. I am looking at the documents now, the deputy said. I see the title. I see the repo order. And I watched the video. Is Gavin still telling you I have dementia? I asked. The deputy cleared his throat. He said a lot of things, sir. Most of them do not seem to line up with this paperwork. I want my trailer unhooked, deputy, I said. Right now. I do not want that man driving another inch with my Airstream. As for the truck, the repo order gives me the right to seize it, but I am not a monster. I will not leave my grandchildren stranded in the desert. He can keep the truck for now to get them to safety, but the trailer stays. Understood, Mr. Coleman, the deputy said. Hold on. I heard the deputy walking back towards Gavin. The gravel crunched under his boots. I heard Gavin's voice perk up, expecting victory. Did you tell him? Is he unlocking it? Step away from the vehicle, sir, the deputy's voice boomed. It wasn't friendly anymore. What Gavin stammered. Why, you are in possession of stolen property, the deputy said. I have just reviewed the owner's documentation. You are going to unhook that trailer immediately. If you do not, I will place you under arrest for grand theft auto. But he's lying, Gavin shrieked. It was a gift. I saw the video, sir. The deputy cut him off. It didn't look like a gift. It looked like strong-arm robbery. Now you have two choices. You unhook that trailer and leave it here on the shoulder for the owner's recovery team, or you go to jail in front of your kids. Which is it going to be? I listened to the sound of Gavin's world cracking. He tried to argue, his voice going high and desperate, but the deputy wasn't having it. The white victim card had expired the moment that video played. I heard the clanking of chains. I heard the heavy thud of the trailer jack hitting the dirt. Gavin was doing manual labor in 100-degree heat in a suit. He was unhooking the dream he thought he had stolen. When he was done, he got back on the phone. Darius, he hissed, his voice venomous. You left us here. You humiliated me. You humiliated yourself, Gavin, I said. You have the truck. The AC is still disabled, by the way. I suggest you drive with the windows down. It is a long way back home. He hung up. On my screen, I watched the red dot split in two. The Airstream stayed put. The truck began to move again slowly, defeatedly, heading east. He wasn't going to the Grand Canyon. He was limping back to the life he tried to escape. I closed the tracking app, one asset secured, one enemy exposed. But the war wasn't over. Gavin was desperate now. And desperate men do dangerous things. He wouldn't go to the nursing home. He would come for the house. He would come for the papers. I stood up and walked to the wall safe behind my painting. I took out a thick file folder. It was time for my next appointment. Sloan was waiting. I knew exactly where Gavin was going. I didn't need a GPS tracker to predict the movements of a desperate man. When a rat is cornered in a maze, it doesn't stop to think. It runs back to the only source of food it knows. Gavin wasn't going home to cool off. He wasn't going to apologize to his wife for dragging her into the desert heat without air conditioning. He was driving that sweaty, overheating truck straight back to my house. He wasn't coming to return the truck. He was coming to burn the bridges he hadn't already destroyed. I wasn't there to greet him. I had left the house hours ago, right after I sent the email to the sheriff. I knew that once the police let him go, his humiliation would turn into a blind, destructive rage. He would come for the one thing he thought could save him from his financial ruin. The house. My house. In my mind's eye, I saw him pulling into my driveway, the truck's engine ticking as it cooled. I imagined him storming up the front steps, bypassing the key he had for emergencies, and kicking the door in. He wouldn't care about the alarm. He wouldn't care about the neighbors. He was past the point of caring about appearances. He was a man drowning, and he was looking for a life raft made of paper. He would go straight to my study. He would tear the books off the shelves. He would overturn the mahogany desk where I had spent 40 years managing logistics for a fleet that moved the American economy. He was looking for the wall safe behind the painting of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the painting Beatrice had loved so much. He needed the deed. He needed the physical copy of the title to my home. In his twisted, frantic mind, he thought that if he held the paper, he held the power. He thought he could forge a quick sale, liquidate my sanctuary, and use the cash to bury his mistakes before the world found out. He was screaming my name in an empty house, cursing the old man who had outsmarted him, smashing picture frames that held memories he never respected. But while Gavin was destroying my office, I was sitting in a climate-controlled conference room on the other side of town, sipping a glass of ice water. Across from me sat Sloan. She didn't look like the gritty private eyes you see in movies. She wore a tailored navy suit, and her hair was pulled back in a sharp professional bun. She looked like a corporate shark, which was exactly why I hired her. She was the daughter of an old friend I had helped get sober back in the 90s. She owed me nothing, but she gave me loyalty that money couldn't buy. "Darius, you are not going to like this," Sloan said. Her voice was steady, devoid of the pity I hated. She slid a thick black folder across the glass table. It stopped perfectly at the edge right in front of my hands. I opened it. The first page was a summary of Gavin's financial health. It was an autopsy of a disaster, red ink everywhere, maxed out credit cards, personal loans with interest rates that should be illegal. And then the centerpiece of his failure, a trading account statement. He didn't just lose money, Sloan explained, tapping a manicured fingernail on the page. He incinerated it. 6 months ago, Gavin leveraged everything he could touch. He took out cash advances. He borrowed from friends. And then he poured $200,000 into a speculative cryptocurrency exchange that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. It collapsed last Tuesday. I stared at the numbers. $200,000. Gone. Vaporized into the digital ether. He is insolvent, Darius Sloan continued. But that is not the worst part. The people he borrowed the initial stake from aren't banks. They are hard money lenders, the kind that don't send letters. They send people with baseball bats. That is why he tried to take the trailer. He needed a quick 50 grand to keep them away for another month. When you took the trailer back, you didn't just ruin his vacation, you took away his hush money. So he is coming for the house, I said, connecting the dots. He needs to sell the house to pay the sharks. Sloan nodded. But he can't sell the house, Darius, because he already mortgaged it. The room went silent. The hum of the building's ventilation system seemed to fade away. I looked up at Sloan, confusion warring with anger in my chest. "That is impossible," I said. "I own that house free and clear. I paid off the mortgage 5 years ago. The deed is in my name and Beatrice's name." "Turn to page 4, Sloan said softly. I turned the page. It was a copy of a loan document from a predatory lending firm dated 3 months ago. It was a second mortgage on my property secured against the equity. A loan for $200,000. I scanned the bottom of the page for the signatures. I expected to see a clumsy forgery of my own name. I expected to see Gavin's handwriting trying to mimic mine. But my name wasn't there. Instead, there was a signature that made my breath catch in my throat. It was delicate, looped, and familiar. It was Beatrice's signature. Beatrice Coleman. My wife. My partner. The woman I had buried 3 years ago. "He didn't forge your name," Sloane said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. "He knew a forgery of your signature might be flagged because you are still active in the credit system. So he used a loophole. He dug up an old, durable power of attorney document that Beatrice signed 10 years ago, back when she had her first health scare. It gave power of attorney to her daughter Nia in the event of incapacitation. I felt a cold numbness spreading through my limbs. I looked at the signature again. It wasn't Beatrice's hand. I knew every curve of her writing. This was an imitation. A good one, but an imitation. And then I looked at the witness line. Witnessed and authorized by attorney-in-fact Nia Coleman Miller. The room seemed to tilt. "Nia, my daughter, my baby girl, he forced her to do it," Sloane said quickly, seeing the look on my face. "We have text messages, Darius. He threatened her. He told her he would leave her. He told her he would take the kids and tell the court she was unfit. He told her it was just a temporary loan, that he would pay it back before anyone noticed. He made her sign her dead mother's name to a lien on the house she died in." I closed the folder. I placed my hands flat on the cool leather of the folder cover. I tried to breathe, but the air felt thin. Gavin hadn't just stolen my money. He hadn't just insulted me. He had desecrated the memory of my wife. He had dragged our daughter into a felony fraud that spit on her mother's grave. He had used the ghost of the woman who loved him, who welcomed him into our home, to finance his gambling addiction. This wasn't about money anymore. This was a violation of the sacred. Beatrice loved that house. She planted the roses in the front yard. She picked the paint for the kitchen. That house was her legacy to her grandchildren, and Gavin had pawned it like a cheap watch. And Nia had held the pen. She had let him guide her hand. She had chosen her husband's lies over her mother's honor. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Darius, Sloane said, standing up with me. "What do you want to do? We can go to the police with this right now. This is fraud, identity theft, elder abuse." "Not yet," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was hollow, empty of the warmth that usually defined me. "If I go to the police now, Nia goes to jail too," I said. "She signed the papers. She is a co-conspirator." Sloane nodded. "She is, but she was coerced." "It doesn't matter," I said. "She is an adult. She made a choice. But I need to hear it from her. I need to know if she is too far gone to be saved." I picked up the folder. I didn't feel like a father anymore. I felt like a judge who had just read a damning verdict. "Call the bank that holds this fraudulent note," I told Sloane. "Tell them the owner of the property disputes the debt. Freeze the asset. And Sloane initiate Protocol B." "Protocol B," Sloane repeated. "That cuts everything, Darius. The credit cards, the insurance, the cell phone plans, the trust fund access. It cuts them off completely. Do it," I said. "He wants to play with debt. Let's see how he handles poverty." I walked out of the conference room and into the bright afternoon sun. I took my phone out of my pocket. I dialed Nia's number. It was time for the hardest conversation of my life. I wasn't calling to yell. I wasn't calling to cry. I was calling to see if I still had a daughter. I stood on the sidewalk outside the office building, and the phone felt like a lead weight in my hand. It was no longer just a device for communication. It was a gavel waiting to strike. I stared at the contact photo on the screen. It was a picture of Nia from her college graduation. She looked so proud in her cap and gown, with Beatrice standing next to her, beaming with joy. I wondered if that Nia still existed. I wondered if the woman who was about to answer the phone was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. I pressed the call button. The ringing sound echoed in my ear. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. "Daddy." Her voice was shaky. She was probably still in that sweltering truck, wiping sweat from her forehead, trying to keep the kids calm while Gavin raged at the steering wheel. "Daddy, please, you have to stop this. Gavin is going crazy. The kids are miserable. Just unlock the trailer. We can talk about this when we get home." I did not answer her plea. I did not ask how the grandchildren were. I could not afford to care about their comfort right now. I had to know the truth. I had to know if the rot had spread to the roots. "Nia," I said. My voice was low. It did not sound like her father. It sounded like the director of logistics investigating a cargo theft. "I am going to ask you one question, and the rest of your life depends on the answer. I do not want to hear about the trailer. I do not want to hear about Gavin. I want you to tell me about the loan." The silence on the other end was instant and absolute. It was not the silence of confusion, it was the silence of guilt. It was the kind of silence that screams louder than a confession. "What loan?" she whispered eventually, but the lie was so weak it crumbled before it even hit the air. "The $200,000 second mortgage on my house," I said. "The one signed by Beatrice Coleman 3 months ago. Your mother has been dead for 3 years, Nia. Did you know Gavin forged her signature? I waited for her to deny it. I prayed to a God I had not spoken to in years that she would scream. I wanted her to say that Gavin stole her identification or that she had no idea what I was talking about. I wanted her to be a victim. I wanted her to be innocent. But then came the sound that broke me. It was a sob. A ragged, ugly sound of pure misery. I had to. She cried, "Daddy, I didn't have a choice." "You knew." I stated. It was not a question anymore. He didn't forge it. She choked out. "I did. I signed it. I used the old power of attorney papers. The ones Mom signed before the surgery." The world stopped. My knees actually buckled. I had to lean against the brick wall of the office building to keep from falling. My daughter. My Nia. She had taken the legal authority her mother gave her in a moment of vulnerability and used it to rob her mother's legacy. "Why?" I asked. The word came out as a raspy whisper. "He said he would leave me." Nia sobbed. "He said he was in trouble. He said if I didn't help him get the money, he would file for divorce. He said he would tell the judge I was unstable. He said he would take the kids and I would never see them again." "Daddy, I was scared. He promised he would pay it back. He swore it was just for a few weeks." I listened to her excuses and I felt a coldness spreading through my chest where my heart used to be. She chose a coward over her father. She chose fear over honor. She desecrated her mother's name because her husband threatened her. It was weakness. It was a profound, pathetic weakness that erased 32 years of upbringing. Beatrice would have died before she let anyone threaten her into a crime. Nia had folded like a cheap tent. She had become an accomplice to the destruction of her own family. I listened to her crying. I listened to her excuses. "I am sorry," she kept saying. "I am so sorry." But sorry does not pay back a $200,000 lien. Sorry does not sign a fraudulent document. Sorry does not bring back the trust that just evaporated in the heat of the afternoon sun. "You are not sorry you did it, Nia," I said. My voice was dead. The warmth was gone. The father was gone. "You are sorry you got caught. You signed your mother's name to a lie. You sold our home to save a man who hates us. Daddy, please." She begged, "Help us. Fix this." "I am fixing it," I said. "I am fixing the mistake I made by protecting you from the world. You made your choice, Nia. You chose your husband. You chose the fraud. Now you have to live in the house you built." I pulled the phone away from my ear. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say I love you. Those words belonged to a father, and I wasn't her father right now. I was the man she had robbed. I pressed the red button. The call ended. I turned back to the glass doors of the office. Sloane was standing there watching me. She saw the look on my face. She knew. I walked back inside. I didn't sit down, she confessed. I told Sloane. She signed it. Sloane nodded slowly. "I am sorry, Darius." "Don't be," I said. "It clarifies things. There is no gray area anymore. There is only black and white. Activate Protocol B." Sloane hesitated for a fraction of a second. "That is the nuclear option, Darius. That cuts the credit cards, the cell phone plans, the car insurance, the health insurance. It drains the joint access accounts. It leaves them with nothing but the cash in their pockets. Do it," I commanded. "They stole my past. I am canceling their future. They want to live like adults who make their own decisions, then they can pay their own bills starting right now. Cut it all, Sloane. every single penny. I sat in the darkness of my office and watched the digital notifications roll in on my monitor like a ticker tape of destruction. I did not need a GPS tracker to know where Gavin was. I followed the trail of declined transactions. He had driven the overheating truck 3 hours east, leaving the desert behind but carrying the failure with him. He did not go home. Going home would mean admitting defeat. It would mean facing the neighbors who saw him leave in triumph just that morning. Gavin was a man who lived on optics. He needed to project success even when his world was burning down around him. So he went to the only place where he felt like a king. The Grand Meridian Hotel. I could see the scene perfectly in my mind. He would have pulled that dusty, sweating truck up to the valet stand. He would have thrown the keys to the attendant with a sneer, trying to act like the broken air conditioning was a minor inconvenience beneath his notice. He would have marched Nia and my grandchildren into the lobby, desperate for the air conditioning to dry the sweat stains on his shirt. He needed a sanctuary. He needed a $500 a night suite with room service and high thread count sheets to convince himself that he was still in control. He wanted to buy back his dignity with my money. The first notification popped up on my screen at 7:45 p.m. It was a charge attempt for $1,200 at the Grand Meridian front desk. Status declined. Reason card reported stolen. I took a slow breath. That was the platinum card. The one I had given Naya 5 years ago for emergencies. The one Gavin had commandeered to pay for his golf trips and his bar tabs. He had slapped that card on the marble counter with the confidence of a man who had never worked for $1 in his life. He probably smiled at the receptionist. He probably made a joke about the heat. And then he watched her smile fade as the terminal beeped that harsh, unforgiving note of rejection. I imagined the flush rising on his neck. I imagined him laughing it off. A mistake, a glitch. Run it again. She would have run it again, and it would have declined again. Then came the second notification, 7:47 p.m., a charge attempt on his personal gold card. Status declined. Reason account frozen by fraud prevention. This was the masterstroke. This was where the trap snapped shut. When Sloan and I initiated Protocol B, we did not just cancel the cards I paid for. We triggered a systemic review. I had instructed Sloan to file a formal suspicious activity report with the banking institution that held our linked accounts. We flagged the $200,000 loan transfer as fraudulent activity connected to identity theft. Because Gavin's personal accounts were linked to that transfer for overdraft protection, a feature he had insisted on, the fraud alert cascaded. The bank's algorithm saw a massive disputed loan, a series of high-value transfer attempts, and a report of elder financial abuse. It did exactly what it was designed to do. It panicked. It locked everything down. Gavin was standing in the lobby of a 5-star hotel with a wallet full of plastic that was now worthless. He was trying to pay for a night of luxury, but he couldn't even buy a bottle of water. I picked up my phone and called the hotel. I did not ask for Gavin. I asked for the night manager. I knew him. His name was Robert. We had served on a charity board together years ago. "Robert, this is Darius Coleman," I said when he answered. "I believe my son-in-law is at your front desk trying to check in." "Yes, Mr. Coleman," Robert said, his voice lowered to a professional whisper. "He is. There seems to be an issue with his payment methods. He is getting quite agitated. He is telling my staff that you made a mistake with the banking transfer." "There is no mistake, Robert," I said calmly. "And I am calling to warn you. That man is currently under investigation for financial fraud and identity theft involving a senior citizen. If you accept a check from him, it will bounce. If you let him run up a tab, you will never see a dime. He is insolvent." There was a pause on the line. I heard Gavin shouting in the background. "Do you know who I am?" "I stay here all the time. Just give me the room key and I will sort this out with the bank in the morning," I hear him, Robert said. "Thank you for the heads up, Darius. We will handle it." I hung up. I did not need to hear the rest. I knew what would happen. Robert would signal the security guard. He would step out from behind the desk with a polite, icy smile. He would tell Gavin that unfortunately, without a valid form of payment, they could not accommodate him. He would ask him to leave the premises. Gavin would explode. He would threaten to sue. He would scream about his rights. But he would be escorted out. He would be marched past the guests enjoying their cocktails, past the bellhops, and back out into the humid night air. He would have to stand on the curb and wait for the valet to bring back the truck he couldn't afford to tip for. He was stranded. He had no cash because he lived his life on credit. He had no credit because he lived his life on fraud. He had Nia and 2 tired, hungry children, and he had absolutely no way to feed them or house them. I sat in my chair and looked at the family photo on my desk. It was taken 10 years ago. Nia looked so happy. I wondered if she was happy now. I wondered if she was looking at her husband, the man she sold her integrity for, and finally seeing him for what he was. A man who couldn't even provide a roof over their heads without stealing it from mine. My phone buzzed again. It wasn't a notification this time, it was an email from the bank. Fraud investigation opened. Case number 894442. I had done it. I had pulled the trigger. By filing the report about the forged mortgage, I had essentially nuked Gavin's financial identity. He wasn't just broke, he was radioactive. No bank would touch him, no lender would answer his calls. His credit score was about to crater into the earth. I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights were twinkling in the distance. Somewhere out there, Gavin was realizing that the ATM he had been punching for 5 years had just eaten his card. He was realizing that Darius Coleman wasn't just a source of funds. I was the dam holding back the river, and I had just opened the floodgates. He would be desperate now, truly desperate. He had no money. He had no place to go. He had a wife who was likely hysterical and children who needed dinner. The hotel lobby had rejected him. The credit card companies had rejected him. There was only one place left for him to go. He would come here. He would come to the source. He wouldn't come to apologize. He wouldn't come to beg. His ego was too fragile for that. He would come to take. He would come to force a signature. He would come to try and physically intimidate the old man he thought was weak. I turned away from the window. I walked out of the study and down the hall to the front door. I checked the deadbolt. It was solid. But locks are for honest people. Gavin wasn't honest. I picked up the phone again and dialed Sloan. "He is locked out," I said. "He is on his way here." "I know," Sloan replied. Her voice was sharp alert. "I have a team on standby. 2 men, ex-military. Do you want them at the perimeter?" "No," I said. "I want them inside. I want them in the living room. Bring the dog." "The dog?" Sloan asked. "You mean Brutus?" "Yes," I said. "Gavin hates dogs. And Brutus hates loud noises. It seems like a perfect match." I hung up the phone. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to call the police and wait 20 minutes for a patrol car while he kicked down my door. I was going to sit in my armchair. I was going to wait for him. And when he broke into my sanctuary expecting a frail old victim, he was going to find a fortress. He wanted to play the tough guy. He wanted to use force. Fine. I would speak his language. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady. My heart was calm. The sadness was gone, burned away by the righteous anger of a man defending his castle. Let him come. Let him bring his rage and his entitlement. I had something waiting for him that was heavier than a trailer and colder than a frozen bank account. I had the truth. And tonight I was going to deliver it with both barrels. The sound of shattering glass cuts through the silence of a suburban midnight like a gunshot. I was not asleep. I was sitting in my wingback chair in the living room facing the hallway that led to the kitchen. I knew he would not come through the front door. The deadbolt was too strong, and Gavin was not a skilled burglar. He was a desperate amateur. He went for the kitchen window just as I anticipated. I heard the latch give way and the heavy thud of a body hitting the linoleum floor. He was breathing hard, ragged gasps that echoed through the quiet house. I could smell him from here. The stale sweat of a man who had spent hours in a hot truck and the metallic tang of fear. I did not move. I rested my hands on the armrests of my chair and waited. I heard his footsteps stomping down the hall. He was not trying to be stealthy. He wanted to be heard. He wanted to project power. He rounded the corner into the living room, and for a moment he was just a silhouette against the moonlight streaming through the broken window. He was holding a baseball bat. It was an aluminum bat, probably one he bought for my grandson that he never used. He gripped it with white knuckles, his chest heaving, his expensive suit ruined and stained. "Darius," he screamed. His voice was a cracked, broken thing. "Where are you, old man? I am not playing games anymore. Give me the deed. Give me the papers, or I swear to God I will tear this house apart with you in it." He took a step forward, raising the bat. He looked wild. His eyes were bloodshot and wide, focused on the empty space where he thought I would be cowering. He expected to find a 70-year-old man trembling in his pajamas. He expected a victim. He expected easy prey. I reached out and clicked the lamp on the side table. The sudden burst of light blinded him for a second. He flinched, raising his arm to cover his eyes. "Hello, Gavin," I said. My voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who had watched storms roll in over the loading docks and never blinked. "You seem upset." He lowered his arm and saw me. He saw me sitting there fully dressed in my pressed slacks and a button-down shirt. He saw the glass of water on the table. He saw that I was not afraid, and that made him furious. "Sign the papers," he roared, stepping closer and swinging the bat in a menacing arc. "I need that house. I need the money tonight. You ruined me, Darius. You took my car. You took my credit. You are going to fix this right now, or I am going to crack your skull open." He took another step. He was 5 feet away. He was within striking distance. He thought he was the only predator in the room. He was wrong. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I simply nodded once. From the shadows behind my chair, 2 mountains of men stepped into the light. They were Sloane's best assets. Ex-military contractors who moved with a terrifying, silent grace. Gavin froze. He looked from one to the other, his brain trying to process how the room had suddenly shrunk. And then came the low, rumbling growl from the corner. Brutus, my Doberman, stepped out from the shadows. He was 100 pounds of muscle and teeth, and he was looking at Gavin like a steak dinner. Gavin hated dogs. He had kicked Brutus once 5 years ago when he thought I wasn't looking. Brutus had not forgotten. "Get them back!" Gavin shrieked, backing up the bat, trembling in his hands. "Call them off, Darius. You broke into my house, Gavin," I said. "You are an intruder armed with a deadly weapon. In the state of Arizona, I have the right to stand my ground." He panicked. He did the stupidest thing he could have done. He swung the bat at the nearest guard. It took exactly 3 seconds. The guard didn't even flinch. He caught the bat mid-swing with one hand, twisting it out of Gavin's grip like he was taking a toy from a toddler. With his other hand, he swept Gavin's legs. Gavin hit the carpet face first with a sickening thud. Before he could draw a breath to scream, the second guard had a knee in his back and his arm twisted up behind him in a hammerlock. Brutus lunged forward, barking a thunderous sound that shook the windows, stopping inches from Gavin's face, his jaws snapping. Gavin screamed. It was a high, thin sound of absolute terror. "Please, please don't let him bite me. I give up. I give up. Hold him," I said to the guards. They held him pinned to the floor, his face pressed into the rug my wife had picked out. He was crying now, sobbing into the wool, begging for mercy. He was pathetic. The arrogance was gone, stripped away by the reality of physical force. I leaned forward in my chair. I looked down at him. "You came here to beat an old man," I said. "You came here to steal the roof over my head. You thought because I carry a cane sometimes that I am weak. You forgot that I survived the Chicago logistical wars of the 80s. I have dealt with union busters and cartel hijackers. You are nothing but a soft boy in a ruined suit." I reached down beside my chair and picked up a black file folder. It was heavy. It contained the final nail in his coffin. I tossed it onto the floor. It landed right next to his face. "Look at it, Gavin," I commanded. He turned his head, his cheek rubbing against the carpet. "What is it?" he whimpered. "It is your personnel file from your last firm," I said. "Sloane did some digging. We found out why you really left. You didn't resign to pursue independent trading. You were fired. But they didn't prosecute you because they didn't want the bad press. They let you go quietly." Gavin went still. His sobbing stopped. "You embezzled $500,000 from client accounts," I continued. "You created ghost accounts and siphoned off the interest. You thought you covered your tracks. You thought that because they didn't call the police, you were safe." "How do you know that?" he whispered. "Because I bought the company, Gavin," I said. He tried to lift his head, but the guard pushed him back down. "You what?" he gasped. "That brokerage firm was small," I explained. "Distressingly small. They were struggling after the loss of capital you caused. They were looking for a buyer. I have been investing my pension and my dividends for 40 years. I have a very diverse portfolio. As of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the majority shareholder of the firm you stole from." I watched the realization wash over him. He wasn't just looking at his father-in-law. He was looking at the owner of the debt he had stolen. "I own the company, Gavin, which means I own the evidence. And unlike your previous bosses, I do not care about bad press. I care about justice." I stood up slowly, smoothing the creases in my pants. I walked over and stood directly above him. "You have a choice tonight," I said. "You can sign a full confession regarding the embezzlement, and you can sign a document granting me full uncontested custody of my grandchildren until you are fit to be a parent. Or I can hand this folder to the FBI agents who are currently investigating the crypto scheme you poured that stolen money into. They love connecting the dots. Please, Darius, he begged. Nia. Think of Naya. I am thinking of her, I said coldly. I am thinking that she needs to be free of a parasite. I signaled the guards. Let him up. They stepped back. Gavin scrambled to his feet, clutching his arm. He looked at the door, then at the folder, then at me. He looked at Brutus, who was still growling low in his throat. You have 1 minute to decide, I said. The police are on their way, not for the break-in, for the fraud. Do you want to go to jail for breaking and entering, or do you want to go to federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement? He looked at the black folder on the floor. He knew what was in there. He knew I had him. His shoulders slumped. He was broken. Give me the pen, he whispered. I handed him a pen from my pocket. He signed the confession on my coffee table, his tears staining the paper. He signed away his rights. He signed away his freedom. Now get out, I said. He ran. He ran out the back door into the night, leaving his dignity and his future on my living room floor. I watched him go. I picked up the folder. The police were coming. But this time I had the evidence to put him away for a long, long time. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. Nia was next. You stared at the black folder on the carpet, Gavin, and your eyes were wide with a question you were too afraid to ask, but I will answer it for you anyway. You are wondering how a retired logistics manager could afford to buy a brokerage firm in a single morning. You are wondering how the man you plan to put in a state-run nursing home could write a check that clears for millions without blinking. You made the same mistake everyone makes. You looked at my job title, but you never looked at my portfolio. I did not just move boxes, Gavin. I moved the future. Back in the early 90s, when everyone else was ignoring the internet, I saw what it meant for supply chains. I saw that logistics was about to become the backbone of the global economy. I didn't just work for the transport company. I invested in the technology partners. I became what they call an angel investor. I put my savings into tracking software, into automated warehousing, into the very systems that run the world today. I lived quietly because I value peace over prestige. I drove a sedan because it was reliable, not because I was poor. You thought you were stealing from a pensioner living on a fixed income. In reality, you were trying to rob a man whose net worth is larger than the GDP of some small countries. I have more money in my rainy day fund than you will earn in 10 lifetimes. I watched the color drain from his face as the magnitude of his error crashed down on him. He wasn't just fighting a father-in-law. He was fighting a titan he had mistaken for a peasant. He realized that the crumbs he had been stealing from my accounts were nothing compared to the feast he could have had if he had just been a decent human being. Greed had blinded him, and now the truth was burning his eyes. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over him like a judgment. The embezzlement confession is just the beginning, I said, my voice dropping to a register that vibrated in the floorboards. We are going to talk about my daughter and my grandchildren. I know you manipulated Nia. I know you threatened her. I know you used her fear to turn her into a criminal. You broke her spirit so you could use her as a shield for your own failures. I pulled a second document from my jacket pocket. It was a single page, simple and brutal. This is a voluntary relinquishment of custody and a restraining order, I said. You are going to sign this too. You're going to agree to sole legal and physical custody of the children being awarded to me. You are going to agree to stay 500 yards away from Nia and the kids for the rest of your life. You are going to disappear, Gavin. You are going to become a ghost. Or, I said, letting the alternative hang in the air like a guillotine blade, I will hand that black folder to the FBI agents who are already building a case against the crypto scheme you funded with stolen money. They are looking for a scapegoat, Gavin. They are looking for someone to pin the wire fraud charges on. I can hand them a confessed embezzler on a silver platter. You will go to federal prison for 20 years. You will miss your children growing up. You will die in a cage. The choice is yours. Walk away with nothing but your freedom, or lose your freedom and everything else. Gavin collapsed. He didn't just fall to his knees, he disintegrated. The man who had sneered at me in the driveway, who had mocked my age and my race, was gone. In his place was a sobbing mess of a creature. He grabbed the hem of my trousers, his fingers shaking. "Please, Darius," he wailed, tears streaming down his face and mixing with the snot running from his nose. "It wasn't my fault. You have to believe me. It was Nia. She made me do it." I froze. I looked down at him with a disgust that made my stomach turn. She wanted the lifestyle he blubbered, his words tumbling out in a desperate torrent. She wanted the private schools for the kids. She wanted the vacations. She wanted the clothes. I couldn't keep up, Darius. She pressured me. She told me I wasn't man enough if I couldn't provide it. I only borrowed the money to try and make it big for her. I did it for her, Darius. She is the one who spends too much. She is the one who is never satisfied. I am a victim here too. He was blaming the woman he had coerced. He was blaming the wife he had threatened with divorce. He was trying to use my daughter as a human shield one last time. It was the most cowardly thing I had ever witnessed. He wasn't just a thief. He was a parasite who would consume anything to survive, even his own family. My disgust hardened into a block of ice. I kicked his hand away from my leg. "You are a liar," I said, "and you are pathetic. Naya may be weak, but you are malicious. You preyed on her, and now you are trying to sell her out to save your own skin. Sign the papers," I commanded, pointing at the coffee table. "Sign them now, or I make the call." He scrambled to the table. He didn't even read them. He signed his name with a shaking hand, surrendering his children, surrendering his marriage, surrendering his life. He was crying the whole time, muttering about how unfair it was, how society pressured men to be providers, how he was just trying to live the American dream. He finished signing and looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, expecting pity. He found none. "Get out," I said. He ran. He scrambled out the back door into the darkness, fleeing from the ruin he had created. I watched him go. I had the papers. I had the confession. I had the custody agreement. I had won the battle against the outsider. But the war wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead. I had to deal with the insider. I had to deal with Nia. And unlike Gavin, she wasn't just an enemy I could destroy. She was my daughter, and she was on her way here, right now. I did not hear the front door open. The adrenaline of confronting Gavin had deafened me to the smaller sounds of the house. I was staring at the open back door where a coward had just fled into the night when I heard a sound that broke my heart all over again. It was a gasp, a sharp intake of breath that sounded like a lung being punctured. I turned around slowly. Nia was standing in the archway that connected the living room to the foyer. She was pale, her skin looking ash gray under the harsh overhead lights. She was trembling so violently that the car keys in her hand were jingling like wind chimes in a storm. She had heard him. She had arrived just in time to hear the man she loved, the man she defied me for, scream that she was the reason for his crimes. She had heard him blame her for his greed. She had heard him sell her out to save his own skin. I watched as the realization destroyed her. It wasn't a sudden break. It was a slow crumbling. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the shattered window, the imposing guards who were now stepping back into the shadows and finally resting on the signed papers on the coffee table. She walked forward like a sleepwalker moving through a nightmare. She picked up the custody agreement. She saw Gavin's signature. She saw that he had signed away their children without a fight, without a second thought, just to escape the consequences of his own theft. "He left me," she whispered. The words were barely audible. He blamed me. He said I made him do it. She looked up at me, and her eyes were swimming with tears. "He told me he was doing it for us, Daddy. He told me he was building an empire. He told me you didn't understand ambition. He said we were partners." "You were never partners, Nia," I said, my voice heavy with the fatigue of the night. "You were his host. He was a parasite. And when the host ran dry, he tried to detach and find a new one. He didn't just leave you. He threw you to the wolves to buy himself 5 minutes of a head start." The reality hit her and her legs gave out. She dropped to the floor right there on the rug where Gavin had groveled moments before. She didn't care about dignity anymore. She didn't care about the guards watching. She crawled towards me across the carpet. She looked like a child again, a little girl who had scraped her knee and wanted her father to make the pain go away. She reached out and wrapped her arms around my legs, burying her face against my shins. "Daddy, please," she sobbed, her body racking with heaving cries. "I am so sorry. I didn't know he was like this. I was blind. I was stupid. Please forgive me. You have to help me. I don't know what to do. He ruined everything." She squeezed my legs tighter, clinging to me as if I were a life raft in a hurricane. "I can't go to jail, Daddy. I can't lose the kids. You have to fix this. You always fix everything. Please tell the lawyers to stop. I will do anything. I will leave him. I will divorce him. Just save me. I am your daughter." I looked down at the top of her head. I remembered braiding that hair when she was 5 years old. I remembered the smell of her baby shampoo. I remembered the promise I made to Beatrice the day she was born, that I would always protect her. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to reach down to pull her up, to hold her and tell her that I would make the monsters go away. That is what a father does. That is what I had done for 32 years. But then I looked at the wall safe. I thought about the document inside, the mortgage deed, the one with Beatrice's name scrawled across the bottom in Nia's handwriting. I felt the ghost of my wife standing beside me. I wondered what Beatrice would say. Would she forgive the daughter who sold her sanctuary to a shark? Or would she see the woman who had betrayed the fundamental code of this family? Beatrice was kind, but she was not weak. She believed in consequences. She believed that you are defined by what you do when things get hard. Nia wasn't crying because she had hurt me. She wasn't crying because she had dishonored her mother. She was crying because her safety net had ripped. She was crying because she was afraid of the cold. She wanted me to be the heater. She wanted me to pay the bill for the wreckage she helped create. I reached down. I didn't hug her. I took her hands and peeled them off my legs. It took strength because she was holding on for dear life. I stepped back, creating a distance between us that felt wider than the Grand Canyon. "No, Nia," I said. She looked up at me, her face streaked with mascara and tears, her mouth open in shock. "What I said, no," I repeated. "I cannot save you from this. I will not save you from this." "Daddy, please," she begged, reaching for me again. "Don't." I snapped, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't call me that. You lost the right to appeal to my fatherhood the moment you put a pen to that paper. You forged your mother's signature, Nia. You took the name of the woman who gave you life, the woman who worked double shifts to buy you that house, and you used it to steal from her ghost. You desecrated her memory to buy designer purses and fund your husband's gambling." "I didn't mean to," she wailed. "You did mean to," I shouted, my control finally slipping. "You knew it was wrong, and you did it anyway because it was easier than standing up to him. You chose the path of least resistance. You chose comfort over character. You chose him over us." I walked over to the door and opened it wide. The night air rushed in, humid and heavy. "You made your choice," I said, pointing into the darkness. "You signed the papers. You chose your team. Now you have to go play the game." "Where am I supposed to go?" she cried, standing up shakily. He took the truck. "The accounts are frozen. I have nothing." "You have exactly what you earned," I said. "You have your freedom from my rules. You have your independence. Go find your husband. Go find a shelter. Go find a job. I don't care where you go, Nia, but you cannot stay here. This house belongs to Beatrice and Darius Coleman, and you are not a Coleman anymore. You are a thief who broke into our home." She stared at me for a long moment, waiting for the punchline, waiting for the moment I would crack and offer her a guest room. When she saw nothing but granite in my eyes, she finally understood. She turned and walked out the door. She walked past the shattered window glass. She walked out into the darkness where Gavin was waiting. I watched her go. I watched my daughter disappear into the night. I closed the door and locked it. Then I slid the deadbolt home. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I was alone in my fortress. I had won the war, but the victory tasted like ash. I sank into my chair, and for the first time that night, I let the tears fall. But I did not unlock the door. The lesson had to be learned. And school was now in session. Part 11. The USB in the glove compartment. The darkness of Washington Park was not peaceful that night. It was a shroud covering the wreckage of a marriage that had run out of road. My son-in-law Gavin and my daughter Nia were not sleeping in a 5-star hotel suite. They were contorted into the cab of a repossession-marked pickup truck parked in the shadows of a public playground. The engine was off to save fuel. The windows were cracked just enough to let in the humid night air and the whine of mosquitoes, but not enough to let in a breeze. The smell inside that cab was a toxic cocktail of stale fast food sweat and the sharp acidic stench of resentment. Nia was curled against the passenger door, trying to put as much distance as possible between herself and the man who had traded their children for a get-out-of-jail-free card. She was not sleeping. Her breathing was jagged, a wet, hitching sound that punctuated the silence. She was staring out at the empty swing set, watching the ghosts of the life she thought she had swing back and forth in the wind. She had no money. She had no home. She had no father because she had signed him away for a loan that didn't even exist anymore. Gavin sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from falling off the edge of the earth. He was staring at the dashboard, his eyes burning with fatigue and fury. He wasn't thinking about how to fix things. He was thinking about who to blame. He blamed the bank. He blamed the market. He blamed Nia for spending too much. But mostly, he blamed me. He blamed the old black man he thought he could bury. He hated me with a purity that consumed him. He punched the dashboard in a spasm of impotent rage. The plastic cracked. It was a fitting sound for the night. Everything around them was breaking. The impact of his fist against the dash jarred the glove compartment. The latch, which was already loose from when he tore it open on the highway, clicked, and the door swung down. It hit Gavin's knee. He looked down at it, ready to rip it off its hinges. The little light inside flickered, illuminating the empty space where the repo order had been. And then he remembered. The text message I sent him on the highway. Check the glove compartment. He had checked it. He had found the blue paper. He had found the debt. But in the silence of the park with his life in ruins, a thought wormed its way into his brain. Darius Coleman was a man of details. Darius Coleman was a man of layers. When I said check the compartment, I didn't just mean open it. I meant inspect it. Gavin leaned over. He swept his hand into the dark recess of the compartment, feeling the plastic lining. He felt along the back wall. He felt along the floor. His fingers brushed against a seam that felt uneven, a ridge of plastic that shouldn't be there. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. He shone the beam into the back of the box. There was a false bottom. It was a modification I had made years ago when I used that truck to transport cash payments for contractors. A simple pressure latch hidden under the felt lining. Gavin pressed the latch. With a soft mechanical click, the false floor popped up. He held his breath. For a second, the old greed flared up in his eyes. He thought it might be cash. He thought maybe, just maybe, the old man had left a stash of emergency money. He reached in, his fingers trembling. He didn't pull out a stack of bills. He pulled out a small silver USB drive. It was cold to the touch. It was heavy. It looked like a bullet. Nia sat up. The movement of the light caught her attention. She wiped her eyes and looked at him. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. Gavin looked at the drive. He turned it over in his hand. There was a piece of masking tape on the side. Written in my handwriting were 2 words. The truth. "It is him," Gavin hissed. "He left this. It has to be the accounts. It has to be the access codes to the crypto wallet. He kept saying he owned everything. Maybe this is how we get it back." He was delusional. He was drowning and hallucinating a life raft. He reached into the back seat and grabbed his laptop bag. He pulled out his sleek computer. He opened it. The screen flashed a low battery warning, 14%, just enough time to hang himself. He jammed the USB drive into the port. The laptop chimed. A file folder opened on the screen. There was only one file. It was an audio file labeled Exit Strategy 004.wave. Gavin hesitated. The title didn't sound like bank codes. It sounded ominous. But Nia leaned in. "Play it," she said. He double-clicked. The media player opened. The sound filled the small cab of the truck, loud and crystal clear. It was the sound of ice cubes clinking in a glass, then the sound of Gavin's voice. Relaxed, arrogant, drunk. "Baby, you just have to be patient," Gavin's voice said. It was smooth, the voice he used when he was charming a client or a mistress. "The old man is 70. He has high blood pressure. I give him 2 years tops, maybe less if we keep the stress levels up." Then a woman's voice. It wasn't Nia's. It was younger, breathier. It was the voice of the receptionist at his old firm. "But are you sure he has the money, Gavin? You said he lives like a monk." Gavin laughed on the recording. "That is the best part. He sits on a mountain of equity. The house alone is worth $500,000, plus the life insurance. When he kicks the bucket, I get power of attorney over the estate. I liquidate everything." "And what about the wife?" the woman asked. "What about Nia?" Gavin scoffed. The sound was sharp and cruel. "Nia is a cow. She is useful for now because she has the old man's trust. I need her to sign the papers. But once the money hits my account, I am done. She is boring, Tiffany. She is exhausted. She has let herself go. I will cut her a check, give her the minivan, and she can go cry to her dead mother. You and me, though, we are going to Rio. First class. Just wait for the funeral." The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the truck itself. Gavin sat frozen. His hand hovered over the laptop, his face pale in the screen's glow. He didn't look at Nia. He couldn't. Nia wasn't moving. She was staring at the dashboard. She was processing the words, the cow, boring, exhausted. Wait for the funeral. It wasn't the fraud that broke her. It wasn't the theft. It was the contempt. She realized in that second that she had destroyed her father for a man who despised her. She had sold her soul for a man who was planning to discard her like a used wrapper the moment he got paid. "Gavin," she whispered. It was a sound of pure devastation. Gavin slammed the laptop shut. "That is fake," he stammered, turning to her, his eyes wide with panic. "That is AI. Darius made that up. He used technology. You know he is into tech. He is trying to frame me. You called me a cow," Nia said, her voice rising, her hands curling into claws. "You said you were waiting for my father to die. Nia, listen to me," he shouted, reaching for her. She didn't listen. She exploded. All the shame, all the guilt, all the fear she had felt for the last 24 hours condensed into a ball of white-hot rage. She lunged across the center console. She didn't slap him. She went for his eyes. She screamed a primal sound that tore through the quiet park. She grabbed his hair and slammed his head against the driver's side window. Thud, thud, thud. "Get off me, you crazy bitch," Gavin yelled, trying to push her away, but he was trapped by the steering wheel and the seatbelt. "You used me," she shrieked, tearing at his shirt, scratching his face, drawing blood. "You made me steal from him, and you were going to leave me. I hate you. I hate you." The truck rocked violently on its suspension. The horn honked as they struggled against the wheel. It was a brawl, a vicious, ugly fight in a confined space. Gavin struck back, hitting her in the shoulder, trying to get her off. Nia bit his hand, clamping down until he screamed. Lights flickered on in the houses bordering the park. Dogs started barking. In the distance, the wail of a siren began to rise, cutting through the night. The neighbors had called the police, not for a theft this time, but for a domestic disturbance. They were fighting over the wreckage of their lives inside a stolen truck in a public park, and I wasn't there to save them. I had given them the truth, and the truth was tearing them apart. I closed my eyes in my study, imagining the scene. It was necessary. Painful, but necessary. The infection had to be exposed before it could be cut out. And tonight, in the dark of Washington Park, the surgery had begun without anesthetic. The sirens got closer. The end of the line was here. The flashing blue lights of the police cruisers cut through the humidity of the park, turning the trees into ghostly shadows. It was not the kind of rescue Gavin and Nia had hoped for. The neighbors had not called for an ambulance or a mediator. They had called for the law. I was not there to see them dragged out of the cab of that stolen truck, but I know the protocol. I know that when officers arrive at a domestic dispute and see blood and broken glass, they do not ask questions first. They separate and secure. Gavin was pulled from the driver's seat, his face scratched and bleeding, his expensive shirt torn open. He was screaming that he was the victim, that his wife had gone crazy, but the officers slammed him against the hood of the cruiser and cuffed him. Nia was dragged out the passenger side, sobbing hysterically, kicking at the air, still screaming about betrayal and lies. She was treated with the same cold efficiency. They were shoved into the back of separate patrol cars, the metal doors slamming shut on their marriage and their freedom. They were taken to the 4th Precinct downtown. It is a grim building that smells of floor wax and old coffee, a place where dignity goes to die. They were processed like common criminals. Fingerprints, mugshots. Their personal effects bagged and tagged. Gavin's watch, Nia's wedding ring. Everything stripped away until they were just 2 more numbers in the system. They were placed in holding cells, separated by a concrete wall but united in their absolute misery. Nia used her one phone call to call me. It was 3 in the morning when my phone rang. I was sitting in my study, fully dressed, waiting for it. I answered on the first ring. "Daddy." She wept, her voice echoing off the cinder block walls of the station. "You have to come. We are in jail. They arrested us. It was a mistake. We were just fighting. Please bring money for bail. You have to get me out of here. It is cold and it smells and I am scared." She sounded like a teenager who had stayed out past curfew, not a 32-year-old woman who had just assaulted her husband in a stolen vehicle. She still thought this was a fixable problem. She still thought I was the safety net. "I will be there," I said simply. I did not ask if she was okay. I did not ask for details. I hung up the phone. I stood up and adjusted my tie in the mirror. I was wearing my best charcoal suit, the one I used to wear to board meetings when I was closing multi-million-dollar logistics contracts. I put on my gold cufflinks. I polished my shoes until they shone like black mirrors. I was not going to the police station as a worried father in slippers and a robe. I was going as a man of influence. I was going as a man of business. I picked up the thick file folder from my desk, the one containing the evidence Sloan and I had compiled. I walked out to my car, the cool night air filling my lungs. I felt a strange calm. The chaos was over. Now it was time for the cleanup. When I walked into the precinct, the desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork. He saw the suit. He saw the way I walked. He sat up straighter. This is the power of presentation. If you look like you own the place, people assume you do. I am here regarding the arrest of Gavin Miller and Nia Coleman, I said, my voice projecting clearly across the room. The sergeant checked his computer. Yes, sir. They are in holding, domestic disturbance and assault. Bail has been set at $5,000 each. Are you here to post it? From the holding area down the hall, I heard a voice. Daddy, it was Nia. It was... She must have seen me through the reinforced glass of the secure door. Daddy, I am here. Please help me. I looked towards the sound. I saw her face pressed against the small window in the metal door. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes were wild with desperation. She looked at me with hope. She thought the suit meant I was handling business. She thought the folder in my hand was checkbook or legal papers to free her. I turned back to the sergeant. I looked him in the eye. No, Sergeant, I said. I am not here to post bail. I am here to speak with Detective Vance in the Economic Crimes Unit. I believe he is expecting me. The sergeant blinked, confused. He looked from me to the holding cell and back. Economic crimes, sir. It is 3 a.m. He is here, I said. I called him on the way. Tell him Darius Coleman has the file. The sergeant picked up the phone. A minute later, a buzz sounded and a heavy door to the right opened. A tired-looking detective in rumpled shirt sleeves walked out. He looked at me and then at the folder. Mr. Coleman, he asked. I extended my hand. Detective, thank you for seeing me. I walked past the holding area. I did not look at Nia. I did not look at the cell where Gavin was likely pacing like a caged animal. I walked straight into the detective's office and placed the folder on his desk. What is this? The detective asked, opening the cover. I sat down and crossed my legs. That folder contains the evidence of why those 2 people were fighting in a truck tonight, I said. It contains proof of wire fraud, embezzlement, and mortgage fraud. I pointed to the first document. That is a confession of embezzlement signed by Gavin Miller regarding funds stolen from his previous employer. I am the owner of that company now, and I am pressing charges. I turned the page. And that is a mortgage document for my home. The signature at the bottom belongs to my late wife, Beatrice. She has been dead for 3 years. The signature was forged by her daughter, Nia Coleman, under duress from her husband. I am the owner of the property, and I am filing a formal complaint for fraud and identity theft against both of them. The detective looked up, his eyes wide. You are filing felony charges against your own daughter and son-in-law. I leaned forward. I am filing charges against criminals who happen to share my DNA, detective. They stole from me. They stole from my company. And tonight they proved they are a danger to themselves and society. Nia was still screaming my name from the holding cell. Daddy, what are you doing? Why aren't you coming over here? I stood up. I smoothed my jacket. I am not here to save them, detective. I said, my voice cold and final. I am here to ensure that when they stand before the judge in the morning, they are not just facing a misdemeanor for a slap fight. I want them held. I want the bail revoked based on the severity of these new financial crimes. They are flight risks. They tried to flee the state yesterday. The detective looked at the mountain of evidence. He looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He nodded slowly, reaching for his phone. I will call the DA, he said. I turned and walked out. I walked past the holding cells again. Nia saw me leaving. She saw that I had not paid the bail. She saw the detective walking towards her cell with a new set of handcuffs and a new list of rights to read. Daddy, she screamed, a sound of pure betrayal. Where are you going? I stopped for 1 second. I looked through the glass. I am going home, Nia, I said quietly, though she could not hear me. I am going to the home you tried to sell. I walked out into the night. The air was fresh. The sun was just starting to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. It was a new day. And I was finally free. 7 days. That is exactly 168 hours since the night I walked out of the police station, leaving my daughter and her husband in a holding cell. A lot can happen in a week. Empires can fall, fortunes can be lost, and the illusion of a middle-class life can evaporate like water on a hot sidewalk. Gavin managed to make bail after 48 hours. He used the last of his hidden cash reserves and called in a favor from a college buddy who hadn't heard the news yet. He walked out of jail with an ankle monitor strapped to his leg and a delusion stuck in his head. He truly believed that this was just a misunderstanding. He believed that if he could just get back to his house, his sanctuary, he could talk his way out of it. He thought he could charm the judge. He thought he could intimidate me. He went back to the suburban house he shared with Nia, the house they had filled with furniture they couldn't afford and memories that were now tainted. Nia was there too, released on her own recognizance because she had no prior record, huddled in the bedroom with the shades drawn, terrified to show her face to the neighbors. But the clock was ticking on their sanctuary. While they were arguing in their living room about whose fault it was, the machinery of finance was grinding forward. I had set it in motion the day I discovered the fraud. I didn't just stop paying their bills. I accelerated their debts. The mortgage on their personal home, the one they bought before they tried to steal mine, was a variable rate nightmare they had neglected for months. They were 4 months behind. In the world of banking, that is the kill zone. On Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock sharp, a black sedan and a moving van pulled up to the curb in front of their house. It wasn't a social call. It was the sheriff's civil division accompanied by a representative from the lender. They walked up the driveway with the heavy, purposeful steps of men who have a job to do and no patience for tears. They pounded on the door. I wasn't there to hear the knock, but I know what it sounded like. It sounded like Judgment Day. Gavin opened the door wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, the uniform of a man who has given up. When he saw the uniforms, he didn't cower. He puffed up. He tried to summon the ghost of the arrogant stockbroker he used to be. "You can't be here," Gavin shouted, his voice cracking loud enough for the neighbors to hear across the street. "I have rights. This is my property. I am in the middle of a legal dispute. You have to give me 30 days' notice. Get off my porch." The lead officer didn't blink. He held up a piece of paper. "This is a writ of possession, sir. The foreclosure was finalized yesterday. You were served notice via certified mail 3 weeks ago. You ignored it. You have exactly 1 hour to gather your personal essentials and vacate the premises. The locks are being changed at 10 o'clock. Nia appeared behind Gavin looking like a ghost. She stared at the moving van, her hands covering her mouth. She knew what this meant. It meant homelessness. "No," Gavin screamed, pushing past the officer, trying to physically block the path to the door. "You are not taking my house. My father-in-law is Darius Coleman. Do you know who he is? He is a wealthy man. He will pay this. He just wants to teach me a lesson, but he won't let us lose the house. He pays for everything. Just call him. Call Darius. Tell him to wire the money. He will do it. He has to do it." He was screaming my name like a magic spell. He was invoking the man he had tried to rob as his savior. It was the height of delusion. He genuinely believed that after everything, after the theft, the assault, the fraud, I would still step in and write a check because I was the safety net. He thought I was a fool who couldn't stand to see his family suffer. The bank representative, a woman in a gray suit who had been standing quietly by the rose bushes, stepped forward. She adjusted her glasses and looked at Gavin with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. She held a clipboard in her hand. She looked at the document, then at Gavin. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice cutting through his hysteria like a razor, "we did not come here on behalf of First National Bank. The bank no longer holds your mortgage. We sold the debt portfolio on Friday." Gavin stopped screaming. He looked at her confused. "Sold it? To who? Who bought a bad mortgage?" "We received a wire transfer for the full outstanding principal plus penalties," the woman explained. "The purchaser is a private holding company. They acquired the deed in lieu of foreclosure, and they instructed us to execute the eviction immediately. They were very specific. No extensions, no negotiations, immediate possession." "Who?" Gavin whispered, the blood draining from his face. "Who is the holding company?" The woman looked down at her clipboard again. "It is a limited liability company registered in Delaware. It is called Justice Logistics LLC. The sole managing member is listed as Mr. Darius Coleman." The silence that fell over the front lawn was absolute. Nia let out a small, strangled sob and collapsed onto the porch steps. Gavin staggered back as if he had been punched in the gut. He looked at the woman, then at the sheriff, then at the sky. "Darius," he breathed. "He bought the house. He bought the debt, sir," the woman corrected him. And Mr. Coleman's instructions were clear. He does not wish to be a landlord. He wishes to secure the property. He wants you out. Now. Gavin looked around wildly. He looked for a camera. He looked for me. He realized then that there was no safety net. The net had become a trap, and I had just pulled the string. I hadn't just stopped helping him. I had become the instrument of his downfall. I used the wealth he coveted to buy the roof over his head just so I could legally take it away. "Officer, remove them," the woman said, checking her watch. "We have a schedule to keep." The deputies moved in. They didn't use force, but they were firm. They escorted Gavin and Nia off the porch. They gave them 5 minutes to grab their wallets and a bag of clothes. They didn't let them take the furniture. They didn't let them take the electronics. Those were assets now belonging to the lien holder. Belonging to me. I was parked 2 blocks away. I wasn't hiding. I was standing in the shade of a large oak tree leaning against the polished aluminum side of my Airstream trailer. I had recovered it from the impound lot 2 days ago. It gleamed in the sunlight, a silver bullet of freedom. I was wearing my sunglasses and a casual shirt. I looked like a man ready for a vacation. I watched through a pair of binoculars as Gavin was led down the driveway. I saw him stumbling, his head hanging low, the fight completely gone from his body. I saw Nia walking behind him, carrying a plastic grocery bag filled with clothes, her face wet with tears. They looked small. They looked defeated. They looked like 2 people who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. I lowered the binoculars. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel gloating. I felt a cold, hard satisfaction. It was the feeling of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. They had tried to take my home. I took theirs. They had tried to take my dignity. I took their pride. They had tried to erase me. I had erased their lifestyle. I watched as the locksmith stepped up to the door and began to drill out the cylinder. The sound carried on the wind. It was the sound of a chapter closing. Gavin and Nia stood on the sidewalk. They had no car because I had repossessed it. They had no money because I had frozen it. They had no home because I had bought it. They looked down the street. They saw the Airstream shining in the distance. They saw me standing there. Gavin took a step towards me, his hand raising as if to beg, but then he stopped. He saw the way I stood. He saw the crossed arms. He saw the wall I had built. He knew. He knew there was no mercy coming from this direction. I turned away. I walked around to the driver's side of my truck. I climbed in and started the engine. The diesel rumble was comforting. I checked my mirrors. I saw them shrinking in the reflection, 2 small figures standing on a curb surrounded by the wreckage of their own choices. I put the truck in gear. I didn't look back again. I had a road trip to take. I had a Grand Canyon to see. And for the first time in a long time, I was traveling light. The baggage was gone. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was the smell of consequences. I sat in the back row, my hands resting on the head of my cane, watching the final act of Gavin's tragedy play out. He stood before the judge, but he was not the same man who had sneered at me in my driveway just weeks ago. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of a man who realized too late that he was not the smartest person in the room. He was trembling. I could see his shoulders shaking from 20 feet away. The judge was an older woman with eyes that had seen every variation of greed the city had to offer. She looked over her glasses at Gavin, flipping through the thick file of evidence that Sloan and I had provided. She saw the wire fraud. She saw the embezzlement from the brokerage firm I now owned. She saw the mortgage fraud committed against a deceased woman. She saw the assault charges from the night in the park. She saw a predator who had finally been caught in his own trap. "Mr. Miller," the judge said, her voice echoing in the silent room, "your actions show a complete disregard for the law and a profound lack of moral character. You preyed on your own family. You stole from your employers. You physically assaulted your wife when your schemes fell apart. You treated the people around you as resources to be exploited." Gavin tried to speak. He mumbled something about being sorry, about addiction, about pressure, but the judge cut him off with a sharp rap of her gavel. "Save it for the parole board," she said. "I sentence you to 10 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement, to be served consecutively with 5 years for mortgage fraud. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to the victims. 10 years. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Gavin collapsed into his chair, putting his head in his hands. He wailed a sound of pure despair. He wasn't crying for the pain he caused. He was crying because his life was over. He would miss his children growing up. He would lose his prime years in a cage. He had gambled his freedom on the belief that I was a weak old man, and he had lost everything. As the bailiffs hauled him away, he looked back at me one last time. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just watched him disappear through the side door, erased from my life as efficiently as a line item on a ledger. Nia was sitting 2 rows in front of me. She didn't turn around when they took her husband away. She stared straight ahead, her back rigid. She was not wearing an orange jumpsuit. I had spoken to the district attorney. I had used my influence as the victim to request leniency for my daughter. I told them she was coerced. I told them she acted under duress. It was the last act of mercy I had left in me. I saved her from prison, but I could not save her from reality. The custody hearing was short and brutal. It happened 3 days after Gavin's sentencing. We stood before a family court magistrate. Nia stood on one side alone, wearing a dress that had seen better days. I stood on the other side, flanked by my lawyers. The magistrate looked at Nia. "Mrs. Miller, you are currently unemployed. You have no fixed address. You have admitted to participating in mortgage fraud even if you were not prosecuted. You have no means to support 2 young children. Your husband is in prison. Mr. Coleman here is the legal owner of the home the children have grown up in. He has significant financial resources and a clean record." Nia looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to invite her back in, to give her the guest room, to let her be a mother again. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't let a woman who had signed away her mother's legacy raise the next generation without learning what responsibility meant. If I took her back now, she would never learn. She would always be the child who broke things and waited for Daddy to glue them back together. "I am granting full legal and physical custody to Mr. Coleman," the magistrate ruled. "Mrs. Miller, you will have supervised visitation rights contingent on you maintaining steady employment and passing regular drug screenings." Nia put her hand over her mouth to stifle a sob. She signed the papers with a shaking hand. She lost her children not because I took them, but because she had failed to build a life that could hold them. 2 weeks later, I went to the local Walmart to buy supplies for the road trip. I walked down the checkout aisles, pushing a cart filled with camping gear and snacks for the grandkids. I chose lane 4. The cashier was a woman with tired eyes and a name tag that hung crookedly on her blue vest. It was Nia. She was scanning items, the beep of the register providing a monotonous rhythm to her new life. She looked exhausted. Her nails, once perfectly manicured, were short and unpolished. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was arguing with a customer about a coupon that had expired. "I am sorry, ma'am," Nia was saying, her voice thin and strained. "The system won't take it." The customer, a large man in a stained shirt, leaned over the counter. "Are you stupid or something? Just push the button. Do your job." I watched my daughter take the abuse. I watched her swallow her pride. I watched her apologize for something that wasn't her fault. This was the woman who had looked down on me for driving a sedan. This was the woman who had demanded a luxury lifestyle. Now she was earning $12 an hour, standing on her feet all day, learning the value of $1 the hard way. I rolled my card up to her belt. She looked up and froze. She saw me. She saw the supplies. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. She looked around, afraid her manager would see her talking. "Hello, Nia," I said. I placed my items on the belt. "Are you leaving?" she asked, scanning a bag of marshmallows. "Yes," I said. "We are going to the Grand Canyon. The kids are excited." Her eyes filled with tears. She wiped them away quickly with the back of her hand. "Tell them I love them. Tell them I am working hard so I can see them soon. I will tell them I promised." She finished scanning. "That will be $42, she said. I handed her my card. The transaction cleared. I took the receipt. I looked at her one last time. She looked small in that blue vest. She looked like someone who was finally starting to grow up. "Work hard, Nia," I said. "It is the only way out." I walked out of the store into the bright afternoon sun. I walked to the far end of the parking lot where the Airstream was parked, shining like a silver bullet. My grandchildren were inside, their faces pressed against the window, waving at me. I climbed into the driver's seat of the truck. I started the engine. As I pulled out of the lot, I looked in the rearview mirror. Nia had come out to collect carts. She was standing in the middle of the asphalt, shielding her eyes from the sun, watching us drive away. She was watching the life she could have had roll down the highway without her. She was watching her father and her children leave on the adventure she had tried to steal. She realized then, standing alone among the discarded shopping carts, that the most valuable things in life are not the things you can buy with a stolen credit card. The most valuable things are trust, honor, and family. She had traded them all for a shortcut, and the shortcut had led her to a dead end. I turned onto the main road and accelerated. The trailer followed smooth and steady behind me. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I had protected what mattered. I had taught the lesson. Now finally it was time to drive. The road was open, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't just managing the logistics. I was the captain of the ship. The tires of the pickup truck hummed a steady rhythm against the cracked pavement of Route 66. The sun was dipping low on the horizon, painting the Arizona sky in violent streaks of purple and burnt orange. It was the kind of sunset you only see in the West, the kind that makes you believe in infinite possibilities. I adjusted the sunglasses on my nose and checked the side mirrors. The Airstream trailer followed behind me, a gleaming silver bullet reflecting the dying light. It tracked perfectly straight, obedient, and secure. It was no longer a stolen asset or a point of contention. It was my home. It was my vessel. I glanced in the rearview mirror. My 2 grandchildren were in the back seat. My grandson was asleep, his head resting against the window, his mouth slightly open. My granddaughter was awake, looking out at the passing cactus and the distant mesas. She caught my eye in the mirror and smiled. It wasn't the scared, confused smile she had worn for the last month while her parents fought over money and lies. It was a genuine smile. It was the smile of a child who feels safe. She knew that with Grandpa Darius, the bills were paid, the food was on the table, and the monsters had been banished. We had left the city limits an hour ago. We had left behind the courthouse, the jail, and the Walmart where Nia was currently scanning barcodes for minimum wage. I didn't feel the pull of the past dragging on the hitch. The truck moved effortlessly. I had spent 40 years moving freight for other people. I had moved electronics, medical supplies, and hazardous materials. I had managed fleets of thousands of trucks, ensuring they arrived on time and on budget. But this was the most important cargo I had ever hauled. I was transporting the future of my family away from the wreckage of its past. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I felt the vibration of the road. I felt the power of the engine. I wasn't just driving, I was commanding. They thought they could put me in a box. That is what kept running through my mind as the mile markers flew by. Gavin and Naya looked at my gray hair and my cane, and they saw an expiration date. They saw a man who was finished. They thought 70 was the end of the line. They thought it was the time to sit in a rocking chair and wait for the lights to go out. They wanted to warehouse me like obsolete inventory. They wanted to stick me in golden oaks and sell off my assets to fund their delusions. They were wrong. 70 isn't the end. 70 is when you finally know how the game is played. I have spent my whole life building, saving, and planning. I dealt with union strikes in the 80s. I navigated the tech boom in the 90s. I survived the recession in 2008. I have more experience in my little finger than Gavin had in his entire body. He thought he was a shark because he wore a suit and traded crypto. He didn't realize he was swimming with a leviathan. I looked at my hands on the wheel. They were weathered, but they were strong. I didn't feel old. I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The heavy lifting was done. The parasites had been exterminated. For years I had carried the weight of Nia's expectations. I had carried the burden of Gavin's failures. I had silently fixed their mistakes, paid their debts, and smoothed over their cracks. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was keeping the peace. But all I was doing was feeding a cancer. Now the cancer was cut out. The surgery had been painful. It had been bloody. But the patient had survived. I was the patient, and I had never felt healthier. I didn't have to worry about anyone forging my signature anymore. I didn't have to worry about secret loans or hidden resentments. My circle was small now. It was just me and these 2 kids. But it was a circle of truth. There were no lies in this truck. There was only the open road and the promise of tomorrow. I reached for the dashboard and turned the dial on the radio. I didn't want news. I didn't want chatter. I found a station playing jazz. A saxophone solo drifted out of the speakers, slow and mournful at first, then picking up tempo, becoming complex and defiant. It was Coltrane. It was the sound of organized chaos resolving into beauty. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel in time with the music. A smile spread across my face. It started small, but it grew until it consumed me. It wasn't a smile of malice. It wasn't a smile of cruelty. I didn't take pleasure in Gavin's prison sentence or Nia's poverty. Those were tragedies, but they were necessary tragedies. My smile was about victory. It was about the supreme satisfaction of being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. They told me I didn't need this trailer. They told me I didn't need this freedom. They tried to take my keys. Well, I still have the keys. I have the keys to the truck. I have the keys to the house. I have the keys to the company I bought. And most importantly, I have the keys to my own life. I looked at the horizon. The sun had finally set, leaving behind a twilight sky of deep indigo. The stars were coming out, millions of them, uncountable and bright. I had promised Beatrice we would see the Grand Canyon. I had promised her we would see the world. I was a little late getting started, but I was keeping that promise. I pressed down on the accelerator. The engine roared a deep, throaty response. We surged forward into the night. My enemies were in cages of their own making. I was out here in the wild. This is Darius Coleman signing off. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please like and subscribe. And remember, never let anyone tell you that you are past your prime. The best miles are the ones you drive on your own terms. See you on the road. There is a dangerous misconception that silence in the elderly equals weakness, or that patience equals submission. It does not. The hardest lesson I learned is that true parenting isn't about enabling a lifestyle built on lies. It is about teaching the crushing weight of consequences. My legacy isn't the money in the bank or the property on the deed. It is the self-respect I refuse to surrender. Family is defined by loyalty, not DNA. If you have to buy your place at the table, you are eating with the wrong people. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let go of the hands dragging you down. If you believe respect must be earned and never demanded, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Nia?